At my husband's funeral, my son stood at the podium with a trembling voice and thanked another woman. She was the one who was truly family to us, he said. At that moment, all eyes in the room turned to the woman in the front row, the one in the fitted black dress and perfect makeup with delicate tears resting in her eyes. And me, the real wife, the mother, I sat off to the side unnoticed, invisible. If you've ever felt that kind of shock, like the ground just vanished under you, subscribe to the channel. You're not alone, and there are more stories like mine waiting for you. When the lawyer later informed me that my husband had left everything to her, not a single dime for me, Vivian Hargrove embraced my son and smiled a triumphant smile, as if she had already won. But then I pulled out the second will, and just like that, there was no one in the room smiling anymore. I never imagined my life would restart at a funeral. Jack passed in a sudden car crash. He was heading to a meeting in the city that rainy Tuesday morning. October 15, 2019. The police report said his SUV hydroplaned on a slick highway curve near mile marker 47, slamming into a concrete barrier at 65 miles per hour. He died on impact. The coroner noted no prolonged suffering, but I wondered if a man like him deserved that mercy after the life he'd built in secret. In the quiet hours after, I'd catch myself staring at the ceiling, the rain still pattering against the window like hesitant fingers, and think, did he feel even a flicker of regret in those last seconds, or was he already free of me? We'd been married 38 years. Our union wasn't the stuff of novels, more like a sturdy oak, roots deep but branches gnarled from too many storms. I walked away from my job as a paralegal to manage our home full-time, raising our boy and keeping Jack's world in order. I'll handle the finances. You handle the heart of things, he'd say with that confident grin, his hand warm on my shoulder during dinner. I took it as partnership, not a cage. How wrong I was. Looking back, I see the subtle shift in his eyes over the years, the way they'd linger on the horizon during our quiet evenings, as if he was already somewhere else. I told myself it was work stress, buried the doubt deep. The service was at St. Mary's Chapel in Evergreen Heights, a stone building with tall arched windows that let in pale autumn light, casting long shadows across the worn wooden pews. I wore the navy blue suit Jack always complimented, the one with the pearl buttons that caught the faint glow like tiny stars. I stood at the door greeting mourners, the air outside biting cold, carrying the sharp scent of damp pine from the nearby woods and the earthy tang of wet soil. My hands shook as I shook others, gloves damp from the drizzle, but I kept my chin up, making sure every detail was perfect. Flowers arranged just so in their crystal vases, programs folded neatly with Jack's photo smiling from the cover. Jack obsessed over impressions. Even gone, I played the role, forcing a steady breath when my throat tightened, afraid one crack would shatter the whole facade. Our son Ethan took the podium next. He's 31 now, a systems analyst at a cybersecurity firm in the suburbs, tall like his father, with the same sharp jawline shadowed by a day's stubble. He wore a charcoal suit that fit like armor, the fabric whispering as he adjusted the microphone. His tribute started strong, stories of Jack's rise from clerk to regional director at the engineering firm, his love for fly fishing on lazy Sundays, the way he'd cast his line into the glassy lake at dawn. I smiled faintly, remembering those trips where I'd packed the cooler with sandwiches, my fingers sticky from peanut butter. Then Ethan paused, voice cracking like thin ice. "And there's someone special I need to thank," he said, eyes scanning the crowd, lingering just a beat too long on the front row. My heart swelled, a fragile warmth blooming in my chest despite the chill. Finally, after all my unseen years, nursing Jack through his back surgery in 2012, wiping sweat from his brow in that stuffy hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee, scraping together tuition for Ethan's MIT classes in 2010 when scholarships fell short by $3,200, he'd see me. I'd pictured it 1,000 times in the sleepless nights leading up. My mother, who held us together. But the words that came gutted me, sharp and cold. Someone who stood by Dad in his hardest days, Miss Vivian Hargrove. A hush rippled through the pews, the only sound the faint creak of wood as people shifted. From the front row, she rose slightly, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief that fluttered like a white flag. Mid-50s, elegant in that fitted dress hugging her figure, silver-streaked hair in a sleek chignon that caught the light. She nodded graciously before sitting, her posture perfect, unyielding. Whispers followed. Who's she? Looks like she belongs up there. The air grew thick, heavy with unspoken questions, and I felt my pulse throb in my temples. Vivian Hargrove. The name hit like a slap, echoing in my mind. Jack's executive assistant for over a decade, promoted to operations manager 5 years back. He'd brush off my questions with a casual wave. She's efficient, that's all. No need to read into it. I recalled the firm holiday party in 2017 at the downtown ballroom. She'd handed me a flute of champagne, bubbles rising like false promises, all warm smiles, and easy chatter that filled the space between us. Your husband's lucky, she'd said then, her perfume, something floral and expensive, lingering as she leaned in. I laughed it off as flattery, clinking glasses. Now, it felt like a predator's lure, and a shiver ran down my spine, cold as the draft slipping under the chapel door. Ethan stepped down and hugged her first, right there in the aisle, his arms wrapping around her with a familiarity that twisted my stomach. You're the real family now, he murmured, loud enough for me to catch over the organ's fading notes, a somber hymn that now sounded mocking. My teacup rattled in its saucer, hot liquid sloshing dangerously close to the rim. The room spun, the polished oak pews gleaming under the lights, the overpowering scent of lilies mixing with the faint mustiness of old hymnals. Mourners offered condolences as they filed past. Jack was one of a kind. Such a loss. I nodded, mechanical, my smile a mask cracking at the edges, teeth clenched to hold back the sob building in my throat. That exchange wasn't just a slip. It exposed a fracture running decades deep, a hidden fault line I'd never felt trembling before. How long had Ethan known? Why parade her like that, in my place, while I sat like a ghost in the shadows? I needed air, fresh and biting, but duty pinned me. Handshakes. Murmured thanks, until the last guest left, their footsteps echoing away into the gray afternoon. Home that night felt hollow. A 4-bedroom colonial on Maple Lane in Evergreen Heights, address 1427. The living room clock ticked louder than usual, each second a hammer against the silence, the house creaking softly as if sighing in relief. I shrugged off the suit jacket, noticing a loose thread on the cuff snagging my nail, like my unraveling life, one pull from coming apart. Jack's leather armchair sat empty, indented from years of him sinking into it after dinner, newspaper rustling in his hands, the faint scent of his aftershave still clinging to the fabric. I wandered to the kitchen, tiles cool under my stockinged feet, and poured scotch from his decanter, smooth, peaty, burning my throat, not my taste, but his ritual. I sipped slowly, staring at the amber liquid swirl, wondering how many nights he'd done the same while I slept upstairs. Sleep evaded me, the bed too vast and cold without his familiar weight. I dragged out the cedar chest from the attic, dust motes dancing in the flashlight beam like tiny ghosts, the air thick with the musty smell of forgotten time, old albums, our wedding in 1981 at the Lakeside Pavilion, me in lace with wildflowers woven into my hair, Jack beaming beside me, his hand firm on mine. Early photos of Ethan gap-toothed at 6, building sand castles on Lake Michigan, waves lapping at his toes as he giggled. Buried deeper, my old business cards from the law firm, paralegal, certified in estate planning, 1995, the edges frayed from years in a drawer. Jack had convinced me to quit, focus on family. We've got enough. His voice echoed in my head, reassuring then, suffocating now. I believed it was security. Now it screamed surrender. and I traced the raised ink with my finger, feeling the woman I used to be slip away. By dawn, resolve hardened in the pale light filtering through the curtains, bird song starting faint outside. This wasn't grief. It was theft of my role, my future, the life I'd poured into every corner of this house. But the real blow waited at the lawyer's office 2 days later, a meeting I dreaded yet clung to for answers. The firm was on Elm Street, 3rd floor, smelling of polished mahogany and fresh coffee brewing in the corner. Steam curling lazily, Harold Klein, Jack's estate attorney since 2005, adjusted his bifocals with a soft click, his tie slightly askew. Per the will dated March 12, 2016, invoice number 8562 confirmed. Assets transfer primarily to Ms. Vivian Hargrove, the primary residence at 1427 Maple Lane, the cabin in Willow Creek valued at $450,000, and liquid accounts totaling $1.2 million. I gripped the armrests, leather creaking under my fingers, knuckles whitening as nausea rose. Ethan sat across, posture rigid, eyes on his phone screen glowing in the dim room. No shock, no glance my way, just that impassive stare. Klein continued, voice droning. Marital home excluded via premarital agreement amendment you signed in 2014. My signature? Forged in memory but real. I trusted Jack blindly, penning my name without a second read, his hand steady on my back. Vivian arrived late, gliding in like she owned the space, heels clicking sharply on the hard wood, Ethan at her side like a shadow. She wore a cream blouse, pearls gleaming against her skin, a faint jasmine scent trailing her. As Klein wrapped up, she hugged Ethan tightly, then shot me a pitying glance, lips pursed. "I'm so sorry for your loss," she said, voice honeyed and smooth. "Jack wanted this fair." Fair? The word ignited something fierce. "You sat in my front row," I whispered, voice steel despite the tremor in my hands. Her smile tightened, eyes narrowing just a fraction. "Family deserves the best seats," Ethan nodded, chin lifting. "Dad chose wisely, Mom. She earned it." His tone carried an edge, defensive, like I'd challenged something sacred. Earned. The word burned through me, hot and unrelenting. I stood, legs steady despite the quake inside, heart pounding against my ribs. We'll see about that. On impulse, fingers fumbling in my purse amid the tissues and keys, I pulled a folded paper, the duplicate will I'd found in Jack's safe deposit box at First National Bank. Key number 319 accessed the week before with my marital rights as surviving spouse, the vault's cold air still fresh in my lungs. Dated January 5th, 2019, just months before the crash. It named me sole heir with Ethan as secondary. Witnesses. 2 firm colleagues, signatures notarized, ink crisp. Klein's eyes widened behind his glasses, papers rustling as he leaned forward. "This changes everything." Vivian's face drained of color, her hand fluttering to her throat. "That's impossible." Jack updated it. But the room shifted. Her triumph curdled to dread, the air thickening with tension. For the first time that day, I breathed easy, chest expanding as if a weight lifted. Small victory, but mine. And in that moment, I felt a spark of the old me flicker back to life. That minor turn fueled me, a quiet fire warming the chill of betrayal. No more shadows, but uncovering the full rot would take weeks of digging. Late nights with lamps casting golden pools on scattered papers, and it started with proof I couldn't ignore, a tangible thread pulling me deeper. I drove straight to the bank after, rain smearing the windshield in relentless sheets, wipers thumping rhythmically. The vault attendant, a wiry man named Ted with calloused hands, handed over the box contents, deeds yellowing at the edges, stock certificates crisp in their folders, and a yellowed envelope marked Personal, VH, marked with Jack's precise handwriting. Inside, a receipt for the Willow Creek cabin transfer, $285,000 paid via wire on July 22, 2014, from Jack's firm account to Hargrove Properties, LLC. My hands trembled. paper crinkling as memories flooded, the cabin's pine-scented air, laughter echoing off log walls. I'd vacationed there with Ethan in 2011, when he was 22 and fresh from college, cooking s'mores over the fire pit, sticky marshmallow on our fingers, believing it ours. Flashback to that summer, Ethan, 22 then, fresh from college, laughing as we hiked the trails, pine needles crunching underfoot, sunlight dappling through branches. "This place is magic, Mom," he'd said, sweat beading on his forehead, eyes bright. Jack had joined late, distracted calls pulling him away every afternoon. Now I saw it. Weekends with her, building their world while I held ours together. Home. I rifled Jack's desk in the dim study, drawers sticking with age, the scent of old paper and ink rising. Tax returns from 2015 showed discrepancies. $47,000 consulting fees to Vivian's LLC. No invoices attached. Lines blurring under my magnifying glass. Heart pounding, a drum in my ears, I photographed everything. Timestamp 3:47 p.m. flashing on the screen. I wondered if those fees had bought more than just a cabin. That thought pulled me onward. Neighbor Ellen Pierce, 68. Retired nurse with a porch swing creaking in the breeze and endless tea steaming in floral mugs. Confirmed suspicions over her backyard fence next afternoon. The sun warm on our faces, birds chirping overhead. Vivian, oh honey, she was here plenty. Remember that spring flood in 2018? Jack and she sandbagged your basement while you visited your aunt. I waved from my window. They looked cozy, sharing umbrellas, rain dripping from their hoods. Flood? Jack said he'd handled it solo, his voice casual over the phone. How often? I pressed, gripping the fence rail, wood rough under my palms. Ellen sipped her chamomile, steam curling. Regular. Symphonies downtown too. Tickets in his car once, 2 seats tucked in the glove box. 15 years at least. Half my marriage eroded in secret. While I budgeted our grocery runs to $450 a month, clipping coupons at the kitchen table under the hum of the fluorescent light, Jack funneled thousands her way. Rage simmered, hot in my veins, but reflection followed in the quiet walk home. I'd been the steady one, packing Ethan's lunches through his braces years, the bread soft and peanut butter thick, driving him to debate club at 6 a.m., fog clinging to the windshield. Where was my seat? The question lingered, a soft ache. Ethan called that evening, voice edged with frustration over the line's faint static. Mom, drop the will drama. Vivian's devastated. I held firm, pacing the kitchen, phone warm against my ear. She stole my life, Ethan, and you thanked her. Silence stretched, heavy then. Dad said you nagged him into the grave. She listened. His words landed like stones, and I paused, hand on the counter, feeling the cool granite ground me. Nagged? For fidelity, for truth? Come see me, I said, voice steadying. Cafe on 5th, noon tomorrow. He agreed. But I heard the reluctance, a sigh escaping before the click. The cafe, with its checkered floors, sticky from syrup spills and cinnamon bun aroma, thick and sweet, held childhood memories. Ethan's hot chocolate mustache at 8, foam smeared as he grinned toothily. He arrived in khakis, laptop bag slung over his shoulder, thudding against the booth. Why fight this? He opened, no hello, sliding in with a scrape of chair legs. I slid over a manila folder, edges worn, the bank receipt, photo of cabin deed crisp inside. Because this is fraud. $285,000 from your dad's company. His eyes flicked to it, then away, jaw clenching. Business stuff. You wouldn't get it. Try me. I leaned in, coffee steaming between us, bitter on my tongue. I gave up law for you two. Sold Grandma's brooch, $2,800, for your laptop in 2010. The pawn shop's bell jingling as I walked out empty-handed. And this is how you repay. He stiffened, fork pausing mid-air over his untouched eggs. You guilt-trip everything. Dad called you a black hole, sucking his energy. Vivian gave him peace. His voice dropped, almost pleading at the end. Peace. The word sliced, reopening old wounds. Flashback. Ethan's pneumonia when he was 12, back in 2001, me at his bedside 48 hours straight in that humid room, monitors beeping steadily, Jack at a conference with vague excuses. "I built your peace," I said softly, pulling a faded Polaroid from my wallet. Us at the county fair, 2005, Ethan winning a goldfish in a plastic bag, me beaming, confetti in my hair. "Remember this?" "Dad missed it." He stared, jaw tight, fingers tracing the photo's edge. No apology, but a crack. His fingers drummed the table, a nervous rhythm. "He was unhappy, Mom." Then sharp, "You were too controlling." The accusation hung, and for a heartbeat, doubt crept in. Had I been? Holding too tight out of fear, controlling, for loving too hard, for fighting for what was mine. I stood, chair scraping, voice firm. "Maybe, but I'm done controlling shadows." Left him with the photo, door jingling as I stepped out. Outside sun broke through clouds, warming my face. A brief reclaiming, light after storm. Tension eased into quiet drive home. Radio humming oldies, lyrics about lost love fading into static, but Vivian's shadow loomed, persistent. Her LinkedIn, operations leader, passionate about sustainable builds and deep connections. Post from 2016, Jack at her team retreat, arms around her in a group shot by a lakeside bonfire. Caption, "Building legacies together." The words mocked from the screen, and I closed the laptop with a snap. Enough. I contacted Sarah Klein, no relation to Harold, but a fraud litigator I'd known from paralegal days, her quick wit a lifeline back then. Met at her loft office overlooking the river. Scent of fresh paint, sharp and hopeful. Sunlight glinting off the water below. Jack siphoned firm funds, I explained, handing USB drive with scans, my hands steady now. Start with Quell Ventures LLC, her shell. Wires totaling $420,000 from 2014 to 2018. Sarah's eyes lit, leaning forward over scattered files. Embezzlement. We contest the will, sue for restitution. She mapped it on a whiteboard. Depose Vivian, subpoena firm records, arrows connecting dots. You'll testify, your marriage, the lies. Her voice was calm, empowering, and for the first time, I felt seen. Months blurred, depositions in sterile conference rooms, fluorescent buzz overhead, coffee staining my notes brown. Vivian under oath, cool as ice, fingers steepled. Jack gifted freely. Love doesn't invoice. But her fake receipts crumbled, dated post-transfer, fonts mismatched under scrutiny, her composure cracking with each question. Ethan texted sporadically, "You're ruining us." Short, pained bursts. I replied, "Truth rebuilds." Reflection in the mirror that night, steam from the shower fogging the glass, grayer hair framing my face, but sharper eyes, lines etched deeper yet resolute. I'd lost weight, clothes hanging loose, but gained fire, a quiet strength simmering. One email from Sarah changed the game. What if the crash wasn't accident? Firm mechanics report. Brakes serviced weeks prior at Wen 200 miles. No failure evident. Anonymous tip via her investigator. Vivian's car tailed Jack's that morning, gray sedan matching her plates. Suspicion flared, a cold knot in my gut, but focus stayed legal. No proof for police yet, just another layer to the betrayal. Climax built to trial. 8 months post-funeral, county courthouse with its marble halls, echoing footsteps, cool air humming from vents. June heat wave pressed outside, but inside tension crackled. I took the stand, voice steady under the wooden bench's shadow. 38 years I managed our home while he built empires. Found receipts, 420,000 diverted. Cabin in my name till 2014, then hers. My hands rested flat, no tremble. Vivian stern, perched rigidly. He chose me because you suffocated him. Her voice dripped venom. eyes locked on mine. Judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with silver hair pinned back, banged gavel sharply. Speculation inadmissible. The room exhaled. Our evidence mounted. Forensic accounting from Sarah's team. The forensic accountants she brought on for the case, $147 million total misappropriated, including stocks Jack sold to her at undervalued 89th her share in 2017. Records subpoenaed and stamped. Her LLC dissolved under scrutiny, papers shuffling like accusations. Ethan testified reluctantly, subpoenaed, standing tall but voice wavering. I knew about Vivian years ago, he admitted, eyes downcast, courtroom hushed. Dad said it was separate. Cross-exam. Did you know about the funds? Silence stretched, then. Some. A murmur rippled. Courtroom gasped, pencils scratching notes. Vivian glared daggers across the aisle, lips thin. Closing, Sarah hammered, voice rising. Betrayal isn't inheritance, it's crime. Her words landed like final nails. Verdict after 3 days. Air's thick with anticipation. Will of 2016 invalidated, fraudulent execution. Assets reverted to me. Home, cabin, accounts, plus $1.8 million restitution with 7% interest. Vivian fined $250,000 barred from firm. She fled town, reputation in tatters. Last whispers of her packing boxes in haste. Ethan approached post-ruling, eyes red and swollen, hallway fluorescent harsh overhead. I was wrong, Mom. Blinded by his stories. We hugged in the hallway. First in years, his cologne mixing with courthouse dust. Forgive? His voice muffled against my shoulder. Healing starts now. Epilogue. 1 year later, I sold the cabin. Too many ghosts in the creaking floors. Netted $520,000 after fees. The closing papers signed under autumn sun. Used it to restart. Opened a small estate planning consultancy from home. Second act's legal. Desk by the window overlooking Maple Lane, helping women reclaim after loss. First client, a widow spotting her late husband's gifts in bank statements, her hands shaking as we reviewed. Ethan visits Sundays, cooking pasta like old times, sauce bubbling on the stove, steam fogging windows. We talk real, his promotion at the firm, my cases stacking up. Vivian? A footnote. Last seen waitressing in a diner 200 miles away, apron tied tight. That faded Polaroid from the cafe, framed on my desk now. Tiny footprints in sand echoing my steps forward. Strength isn't given, it's claimed. If this hit home, comment below. What's your story of hidden truths? And if you believe in fresh starts, subscribe. More like this coming and you're part of it.